Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to see a wonderful full crowd here for the 18th Annual Riley Lecture on Professionalism. It's my great pleasure at events like this to introduce, and I hopefully won't take too long, but there are a few things that I want to say before we start with Cherilyn's speech. The Riley Lecture is an important day, at least for me, because it's a day of reflection. It's a day of reflecting about the profession, about who we are, about who we aspire to be as lawyers. We have our professional individual obligations, as well as thinking about the profession as a whole. There's even a debate still about what is professionalism, what does it mean? And we're still debating all these issues relating to access and diversity and civility and conflict of interest and confidentiality. Those issues don't go away. They just come in different shapes and sizes. And so there's still a lot of work for us to do and a lot of reflection for all of us to have about these issues as the years go by. And I hope that Cherilyn's speech and some of the remarks today will allow us to think about and talk more about these issues that are important to all of us in the profession. As an educator and a teacher of professional responsibility, I try to teach my students not just about the disciplinary rules and how they apply, because for me that's the bottom line. That's what can you, what's the least, what can you get away with and still be a practicing lawyer? And I think that's not really what professionalism is about at all. It's about aspiration. It's about looking at the potential for our profession. And it's to me, it's doing the right thing. And I think Cherilyn's going to talk a little bit more about that theme. Doing the right thing means a lot of things. It means service to the community. It means doing the best for your client. Depends on the context. And I'd like to say that I'm very proud to be a dean at a law school in which professionalism is valued very highly. I think that one of the most important things that we do as faculty and as professionals is to be mentors and to be role models to particularly our students and the lawyers that come after us. And I think we have a great faculty and their role models in their teaching roles every day. But I just want to also highlight, because I'm so proud of the faculty that actually have made it their lives to specialize in professionalism. Dan Reynolds, I don't know if he's here today. Professor Reynolds has spent his life, his professional life, in the area of professionalism and ethics. He was one of the drafters, as many of you know, of the model rules, which are adopted in most of the states in the United States as of now. And he's most recently been working on civility issues in our local courts. And he's a real shining star and a shining example of professionalism. And I'm also proud to say that two of our most recent professors are finding an interest in professionalism as well. Laura Regurtis is working on access to access to justice and to the legal system, and one of our newest hires, Christopher Hines, who is actually home this week with a new baby, is specializing in the attorney-client privilege and corporations. So that's something also I think that Cherilyn cares a lot about. So our school is very proud also to be involved in professional organizations like the ISBA that also value professionalism and public service. And so I want to just spend a few minutes allowing John O'Brien to come speak with us for a minute. He is the immediate past president of the ISBA and is one of our newest members of the Board of Visitors. And he has a special presentation for us this afternoon before Cherilyn's talk.
Thank you, Dean. Friends, lawyers, students, newly admitted students, it's an honor on behalf of the Illinois State Bar Association to be with you on this afternoon and celebrate the wonderful things that this law school is doing. We are all very proud of you. You know, as the dean mentioned, I'm brand new on the Board of Visitors, and I've already learned that Melody in the back of the room is the person who can help you out the most, and that's so much you, Dean. But, and she gave me some very good advice already. We were having lunch with the newly admitted students a couple of hours ago, and it was Italian food. And she told me, take the red sauce, and if you must spill on your tie. So I thought that was good advice, so I've learned something already. At the State Bar, we have just concluded the celebrating the bicentennial of the birth of Abraham Lincoln, our most favorite lawyer, our most famous lawyer in the history of Illinois. And the Dean mentioned we are all wrestling and continue to wrestle with who we aspire to be as a profession. That is ongoing, as the Dean says. But I think one constant in that, one thing I would like to mention to the law students and new admittees is one component of that we believe in very strongly at the State Bar, and that's our commitment to pro bono activities. As you will learn when you are licensed every year, as you reapply for your license, the Supreme Court asks you two questions. And the first question is, last year, did you do any pro bono activity? Yes or no? And if so, about how many hours did you do? Now, you know, we live in perilous economic times. The horrible plague of foreclosure, bankruptcy, financial distress, you know, is more prevalent all the time. Those who qualify for legal services have increased just since 2008 by 21%. In that time, the state's funding for legal services has decreased dramatically to the point of $1,750,000. Needs way up, money way down. Somebody's had to fill this gap, and guess who's done it? And I'm proud to tell you that in the most recent study done by the Supreme Court reporting last year's data, I'm proud to tell you that the lawyers of this state reported to the Supreme Court that we did 2.2 million hours of pro bono service. State, whose job it is to fund these things, 1,750,000. The lawyers, 2.2 million hours. Multiply that times, pick your billing rate, and I think you'll see that we as a profession have a lot to be proud of, and I am proud of it. And one of the things we've commissioned, and I'd like to present to the law school today, is a 4-volume set of the legal papers of Abraham Lincoln. And I am hoping, Dean, that one of your students will be inspired by the example of, again, our most famous lawyer, and will have some use of these books and remember the call to service. Thank you so much for these couple of minutes.
Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our Riley speaker for 2011. She is also a shining star of professionalism, and somebody I just want to spend a few minutes introducing you to, because there's so much in your biography. I just want to highlight a few things for everyone. She, of course, is an alum of NIU Law. That's the most important to me, class of 1978. She has been on the NIU Board of Trustees for some time and served as its chair. She currently serves on the board and has served as its chair for 2 years. I think you served a term a few years ago, and we're very proud of that. So she does tremendous service for us here at the university. She is currently the president and CEO of Murer Consultants, a legal-based healthcare management consulting firm. And in that role, she integrates interdisciplinary expertise to solve problems that include medical, social, economic, legal, and governmental issues. And I bet there are a lot of ethics issues as well that are faced by your clients that you assist them with. She has advocated for quality, low-cost health care for 25 years, which is also a great piece of advocacy she's been involved in, and she writes extensively in the healthcare area. And of course, as some of you know, that's in her DNA, since she has a background in healthcare and served as the director of the rehabilitation medicine of Northwestern Memorial Hospital before she came to NIU Law. She has co-authored now 6 books in the healthcare area, and she has a recent book out just last week, right, that also involves very cutting-edge issues in healthcare, the Case Management Workbook, defining the role of physicians, nurses, and case managers. And if you have any interest in the healthcare area, it might be a good book to take a look at. And she's saying it's not only got some national recognition, but also international recognition, because these are issues that we care about internationally as well as nationally. I'm also proud to say that she is a role model to me. And as the dean, I get to choose the Riley lecturer, so it came to me very quickly who I wanted to bring on this year as a speaker. Cherilyn is a role model in a number of respects. The call to service is also in her DNA, and she serves on many boards and helps out in many, many ways. She also is very generous to the law school and the university. She has a very strong work ethic that I recognize always. She has a commitment to healthcare issues, which are close to my heart as well. And she always does the right thing, even if it's not the most popular. So I respect her for all of that, and I present you Cherilyn Murer, the 18th Riley Lecturer.
Good afternoon. This is such a personal as well as professional pleasure for me, and it is certainly an honor. I'd like to recognize, first of all, Dr. Peters. Thank you so much for being here today. Dean Rosado, your comments touched my heart. John Monacle, who is the president of the Board of Visitors, is sitting here and provides such great leadership. But I'm also very touched to see the leadership of the university here. We are such a family, and my family came out today. Not only the president, but the executive vice president, the new general counsel, Vice President Bittner, the provost, Dean Vorha, Mike Malone, Mallory Simpson. To see the leadership of the university sitting here on a Friday afternoon is most touching to me. This lecture holds so much responsibility. I have thought greatly of this lecture, probably more so than most addresses that I've given in my career, because it's so personal. The relationship that I had with Professor Riley was an honor. It was a flicker in a life. He leaves his legacy here today, and we think of him, if not on a weekly or monthly basis, we think of him on this very special occasion. And it calls to all of us to rise to that occasion in his memory. My relationship with the law school is very long-standing and too very personal, and it really is very much part of my character. I was very young when I decided to go to law school. Not as young as some of you, though, that go directly from your bachelor's program. I was 26, and I had 2 children at the time who were 2 and 6. My husband and I met at a law school picnic at Georgetown. He's much older than I. He was already in law school. I was just an undergraduate at the time. My children still to this day remember the daycare at the law school. My son did not know until he was 14 that cookies came other than in a package, and was very surprised to find that out. Dean Ann Church was a visionary. She was very controversial, and that's okay, and that's good. And she had a mighty appetite for the destiny of the law school, much like our dean today. And we are so privileged to have Dean Rosado in such a leadership position. This lecture is a responsibility to provoke thought. The issue of morality and performance are at the cornerstone of the fate of our country now and in the next decade. As I think back, mine was a very winding road. And I think that the straight road really fits few, and certainly here at NIU is not the norm. There are many winding stories. I'm most proud of the fact that what we're known for at Murer Consultants is our integrity. That's such an elusive term, but it's something we try and live by every day. We provide counsel to clients based on the truth. Sometimes that's a very unpopular commentary. But we try and do it with professionalism, respect, and optimism, and I will talk about that throughout my lecture. Optimism. Optimism that you identify what you can do, not simply what you cannot do. One of the forks in my road was to determine the type of company we would be. Not only the character and the moral aspect of our company, but really what the visibility of that company would be. And I think that any of you who find yourself in corporate America, who find yourself as entrepreneurs, will identify that you have to decide, are you playing on a national level? Are you going to play on a regional level or on a local level? And you know what? It's not really all that different. It's not really that much more difficult to have that perspective on a national basis. Sometimes it takes a little bit of luck. It takes a little bit of identification of the opportunity. And so we became a national company in 1985 because my first client was the state of New York. Kind of auspicious, but hey, that was the client. And at that time, we were hired to establish quality benchmark measures for all of the rehabilitation programs of the state of New York. Now, this is way before we really talked about quality measures. This was way before we talked about benchmarks. It was, how do you identify, how do you validate what it is you do? And so that is where the beginnings came. A major fork in my road was deciding that we would be a legal-based healthcare consulting firm. Now, you have to put this in perspective. It was 1985. Today, so many lawyers have entered the healthcare profession, but it really was not commonplace to be in operations in 1985. The first person I hired was a PhD in public policy from the University of Illinois, Chicago. And he was excellent. And the second person I hired was an MD PhD, again from UIC. They were starting to come through that door. But I thought about it. I actually really thought about it and made a very conscious decision that I wanted to hire lawyers. Now, I had a choice because they came with very little clinical background. But in 1985, we had the Wild West of healthcare. Everything was popping up. And when I could decide, did I want to have a firm that had the technical knowledge of the healthcare profession, or was that something we could learn? And did I want to have a firm that had a basis in the law, that hired individuals that understood both sides of an issue, that they could articulate matters, both verbally and written? And I decided at that time that that's what I would do. And so we continue today to have that niche in the marketplace. Because as a company, we try and understand that the law is our base, but we have to also speak the three languages of understanding finance, because if you don't understand how the money works, you're not going real far. So you better understand, as I look to Dr. Williams, who so capably has led our university in that direction, if you don't understand the money, you really cannot articulate the aspects of the business. And the business is whatever the sector is that you're in, whether it's automotive, whether it's manufacturing, or in my case, whether it's healthcare. And as you grow in stature, so do with the clients with whom you deal. And such clients are highly articulate and persuasive in their own right. They are strong, they are smart, and at times very hard to guide. And so you have to have that ability to understand right from wrong. You have to have the ability to understand values if you are going to guide clients who really can sometimes try and persuade you. And I represent healthcare institutions, so I deal with boards of directors or senior leadership in hospitals. Sometimes it's me and a colleague, one of our staff. Maybe we'll have 15 or 18 people in a room, vice presidents of everything. And they're very smart, and they're very persuasive. And my job has been to just step back and acknowledge how smart they are. But I also say, I'm not here for you to persuade me. I'm here to assure that 3 years from now, the Office of the Inspector General will not be knocking at your door. So why don't we think about what the law says and how we can adapt to that? That usually catches their attention, especially the OIG thing in 3 years. Yeah, they get that. But it's a matter of constantly stopping standing back and understanding the role of a counselor. You set your compass at a young age, and you recalibrate that compass throughout your life. Your teachers help calibrate your compass. Your professors. Sports, competitive environment, music, art, debating. They all help to guide that compass. And I'm struck by a thought that I want to share with you. That is that you must lose from time to time to test yourself, to push yourself, to know how to react in a loss gives you the wherewithal to react to the win. If you never lose, you've never been tested. Parents and grandparents and extended families teach us our values. Those of you who know Michael and I know that we have 3 gems in our life besides our 2 children. But as grandparents, we have 3 angels, sometimes. In speeches, I can say that. We have twins that are 7 and a 9-year-old. And last weekend, we took Cameron, our 9-year-old, who's quite an urbanite young man, to the Museum of Contemporary Art, which he enjoyed. And he was there for an hour and a half. You know what? That's where you teach values. That's how you teach values. And we stopped and looked at an exhibit. And I actually took I think it was a napkin in my purse, and I actually wrote down this quote because I thought it was so powerful. But it was by an artist that was being shown at the Museum of Contemporary Art, and her name was Andrea Siddle. And she said, "The only way you can be free from external rules is to create your own rules that are even more rigid. But because they are your own, you feel completely free." The compass inside ourselves tell us what the rules are. And if we know what the rules are, and if we don't care what everybody else is doing, if we know what is right, then that will be the guiding light. And the guiding light to a good life, to a happy life. I think it's much better to be optimistic than pessimistic because it makes you enjoy life more. It makes you a contributing individual. Great leaders have always set their own rules, and we follow them because of the depth of their beliefs. But true leadership begins with a whisper, not a shout. True leadership cares not only of self, we all care of self, but of stewardship to the whole and to posterity. True leadership sets the bar of expectations of others through example of self. That is leadership. For those of you who are in our profession, for those of you who will go in the profession, leadership is at the essence of the law. A core value must be owning up to the truth, no matter what. In our firm, we deal with fact. So often I feel like a parent, and I take the lessons of parenthood. Because if there is any type of catastrophe, if there's any mistake, if there's anything that wasn't filed right with the federal government, the culture of the organization sets the tone of behavior of the individuals. The worse the situation, the more calm we must all be. We must make sure that in an organization, that what is most abhorred is a cover-up. And what is most embraced is a collectivism of problem resolution. That doesn't just happen. It truly doesn't just happen. It happens by example. It happens over and over again by the response of the leadership of the organization. And that segues me right to boards. Boards of directors of any organization, whether a publicly traded company, whether a small non-for-profit organization, how the board reacts to information sets the tone and behavior of the administration and those who work in the organization. If a board is reactionary to any and every event, there's a self-protectionism that is inherent in the nature of individuals. And that means that there will be a protection of the information. I've seen that over and over again, telling boards bits and pieces, partly because there's a fear of the reaction. And you go back, those of you who are parents, go back to your parenting skills. How you react with your children to serious situations guides the way in which they will respond. But we cannot move to accountability unless we have established the pattern of truth in the organization. The culture of the organization sets the level, sets the bar of accountability. We use that word so easily, especially today, especially in today's society. Accountability of organizations, accountability of healthcare, accountability. What does that mean? So many words that we use, we don't know what does that mean. And maybe what it means is not a word. It's an action. It's a deed. It's what you do. Accountability should be a direct correlation to public policy. I was very upset when I read a comment in the New York Times in February, so much so that I kept the paper, so much so that I went looking for it when I was preparing my remarks. And those of you who know me know that Virginia had it. And I'll read you that comment, and I'll have you think about it, and I'll tell you why it disturbed me. And I also put into context from whence it came. So I understand the organization that is making the comment. And that comes from Clint Bolick, who's the litigation director at Goldwater Institute, which we all know is a most conservative research group. And that's not the point that I'm making here. I'm not here to discuss politics of conservatism or liberal politics. I am not here to tell you that. That's not why this comment disturbed me. But he said, when speaking of healthcare reform, the idea of forcing individuals to get government-prescribed health insurance, okay, that's the big debate, not for our own good, but for the sake of subsidizing others, is not right. This statement wasn't taking an objective political position as to why he felt that government-prescribed health insurance should or should not be at the basis of health reform. And I think that's a very responsible debate to have. We have to make those decisions. No, what he said was, to ask us to do something for someone else is just not right. But the strength of America is in its volunteerism. It is the essence of our country, not the individual alone, but the collectivism. De Tocqueville identified that decades ago and was amazed that that thread was really the fiber of the United States of America, volunteerism. We have so many wonderful examples of that. But we have to balance it. And when we see comments like this, as leaders, as counselors, the response should be, we need to debate the issues that are really going to form the healthcare delivery system of the future, but not whether it's right or wrong to support each other. In my everyday life, when I'm not here at the university, I often ask medical staffs who can get whipped up, especially when they become overly concerned with their own financial need and their own personal convenience. I'll often ask them, certainly after I've developed a relationship, because it's kind of a poignant question, but who cares about this hospital? Who cares? Does anybody care? Does anybody care that this hospital will stay here in this community to support the people of this community, not for me and for you, not for the next 2 years, but the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years? Does anybody care? Because I'm not hearing it. That often brings them back. Because I want to say this, in particular for those who have sought out careers in professional arenas, doctors, lawyers, professors, architects, engineers. There is the good, sometimes deep, sometimes on the surface, but it is there. It is there. That morality is there. That profession was chosen because there was a sense to do good. From time to time, we have to remind each other of that. From time to time, we have to remind ourselves that someone has to stand up. Someone has to stand up and worry about the future. I'm not being a Pollyanna, and I'm not saying that that lawyer, that doctor, that engineer shouldn't worry about themselves and their families. Of course. But included in that, we must be concerned with society. And sometimes it's best to rely on that goodness. We had an example of, because we do a lot of focus groups, and there was a physician in this hospital that would do his rounds at 11 o'clock at night. Just would do it 11 o'clock at night. And why? Well, it was, he saw his outpatients during the day and would go home and have dinner and then would come back and see the patient. And I asked the group of physicians, and I said to them, what is the efficacy of seeing a patient and waking up that patient and billing for that patient at 11 o'clock at night? And even more so, what is the efficacy of not waking him up and billing for that patient at 11 o'clock at night? Because that does happen. Throwing it back to them. It wasn't for me to say. I knew it wasn't right, but I wasn't going to get very far. Throwing it back to the group to make their own decisions based on their own conscience. I said, this is something for the medical staff to set its own standards of ethics as it relates to this. Because when that physician consistently sees the patient at 11 o'clock at night, he does not meet with the family. He doesn't talk to the family. How can you really talk to somebody at that hour? It goes to the essence of the quality of what is being done at this hospital. And this medical staff is the group that decides the quality, the tone, and the ethics of this organization. I've heard so often in the last 2, 3, 4 years the phrase, how can I maintain quality when the finances are being cut? And I turn that question around because I'm rather dumbfounded by it. Because quality should be the threshold. We shouldn't have a choice of if I don't have enough money, then I won't have the quality. I think that whatever the field, whether it's a hospital or a university or a company, it's like sports. There's a level of quality that is accepted to be in the majors. There's a level of quality that one expects to be in the NBA. And if you're not, then you're just not there. Now, that doesn't mean you won the pennant or you won the trophies, but there's got to be a threshold of quality. And to threaten, and I've been feeling the threat of if there is not enough money, quality will suffer. Quality can never suffer. It is what it is. It is the thing. So we need to be careful, I think, of the words we choose. We are in a series of rhetorical commentaries that sometimes I don't think we think. We don't think about what we're saying. It's so rote. We need to challenge ourselves. What does it mean to have a good product? I don't care what it means, your widget, your education, and how do we get there? And what contributions do both sides have to give? Whether it's the customer, the patient, or the student. The customer, the patient, the student should not be passive. We should have it as an interactive decision-making. A society's character is defined by the mores of its people. And those mores vary generation to generation. It is these social mores, the collectivism of our speech, that guide the politics, the laws, and the values of a people. Somehow in the last few decades, our moral compass has tilted. Right and wrong, often seen through rose-colored filter of just this is the way it is, you know? This is the way it's always been done. It echoes the negative of cannots rather than the will to do what is right. Today, we are in the eye of an economic and social revolution. Business as usual does not have a place. But that's exciting. We're resetting the stage. We shouldn't fear that. We should embrace that. Fundamental change is required, which will involve reevaluation of our expectations and the baseline parameters of conduct. Giant sectors impacting the baseline of our society are in need of not just repair, but reconstruction. Banking, healthcare, education. We're still in a format of just trying to modify around the edges. The core remains the same. We adapt, we modify around the edges, rather than saying, we have a revolution here. We need to rethink the entire process. Ethics and professionalism are defined by the standards, expectations, and enforcement of a society. Without enforcement, the best of intentions fade, overridden by the banal of common usage. The law and its lawyers are the checks and balance of a civilized society. We cannot be careless nor callous about the law. The impact of non-enforcement on health care has been disastrous. In my earlier days, especially given that I do a lot of work in the South, there was a phrase of wink, wink, nod, nod. That's just the way it is. The state will come in, I know the guy, I know the guy, I know the woman, I know everybody, and it's okay, we don't have to do it, it'll be okay. It used to really frustrate me. You know, one good enforcement would make me really happy, because how am I going to tell you what the rules are and what the law is if everybody goes, don't worry about that, it's okay, it'll be okay. Well, a little bit of enforcement does a lot of good. And last week was kind of interesting to see, not that I address this in a personal way, I really don't, because this person has had a lot of hardship. But Richard Scrushy, who was at the height of healthcare, he was a leader of healthcare and formed a company called Health South, but lost his compass. And last week, there was a yard sale to start to collect on the $2.9 billion civil judgment. Now, I'll tell you, that gets some people's attention. We need that. We need enforcement, just as I have said, to go back as a parent. If you don't enforce the discipline with your children, what happens to the family? Well, the same thing with society. If we don't enforce the rules of society, then what happens to society? We have watched the dial of the compass point straight true north in times of greatness, in times of need, and in times of tragedy. Times of greatness are often driven by shared sacrifice. In the wars that we fought on principle, not greed. The technical revolution is in the mold of the Industrial Revolution, which is transforming our society today. This provokes creative thought and cost efficiencies. And you know, I'm very struck, again, in my profession, in healthcare, a dichotomy that I'm watching, because on the one hand, we're talking about electronic medical records, and the amount of money that's being spent on electronic medical records is just incredible. And many of our clients are spending anywhere from $30 to $40 to $60 million. And yet, do you know something? I am starting to see hospitals buying iPads for all their doctors and for all their boards and going paperless. The iPad, $500 a pop. Now, on the one hand, we're spending $40 million to deal with technology through McKesson, HBOC, or Cerner, the biggest of the big in the technology world. But the technological revolution is also kind of going around all that, because I will tell you, it's still taking a very long time for that process to proceed. And the iPad, the simple iPad, is the way physicians are communicating with the patient, with the administration, with the nursing staff. It's kind of interesting to watch these things, but I think in a revolution is never a straight direction. A revolution always comes like this. So we shall see where that goes, and we shall see. Perhaps that 40 million might come down. In Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, we worried about and committed to health care for a nation. This was the birth of Medicare, which changed the mode of health care delivery. Now, an interesting quote. In 1965, Lyndon Baines Johnson said, "Medicare begins tomorrow." And in 2010, health reform begins in 2014, 2018, and 2020. Maybe we can speed it up a little bit. In times of need, Americans have always shown themselves as compassionate, rallying to individual need of strings that touch our heart. Stories of the fireman, the policeman, the sick child, the orphan. We are such a good and compassionate people. In times of national tragedy, we rally with a quiet resolve. Oklahoma City, 9/11, Haiti, Japan, February 14th. But glimpses and flickers do not sustain us as the compass may falter. The most accurate reading of the compass is in the mundane, the day-to-day, the norm which becomes the unheralded moment. Why did I choose the word amorality in my title today? It's because I am observing a faltering of understanding what is right and wrong. And we are moving into a sense of rationalization. There was an article in the New York Times, very large article, a few weeks ago. It was about a psychiatrist in New York who was very troubled with the changing role of psychiatry, and was speaking of the fact that he was quite disturbed that he no longer provided psychotherapy, but he would prescribe, did you read that? He was there to prescribe drugs. And that whereas he used to see patients for 50 minutes, he now sees them for 15 minutes. And he states that, he himself stated, "I miss the mystery and intrigue of psychotherapy. Now I feel like a Volkswagen mechanic." And he said, "I'm concerned that I may," now I want you to pay attention to this one. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can read this one. "I'm concerned that I may be put in a position where I'd be forced to sacrifice patient care to make a living. And I'm hoping to avoid that." When did it become a choice? When did it become a choice? If I don't make enough money, I can provide shoddy care. I can provide a shoddy product. I can provide a shoddy job because I don't make enough money. And where did that expectation come? And how much money is enough money? The article appeared to be sympathetic to this individual who was struggling, who seemed to have a moral struggle. Again, this angered me. If he feels like a Volkswagen mechanic, well, then do something about it. Don't moan about the fact you feel like a Volkswagen mechanic. You chose a profession. And then he goes on to say, well, I don't want to work 11 hours. Well, don't. You know, you don't have to work 11 hours, but in the meantime, you don't have to say that if you don't make enough money, you won't give good care. I had a pulmonologist say to me, when we were trying to have him come to the hospital, he said, I make more money on an outpatient basis. I said, well, you know, I don't know about that. Maybe yes, maybe no, but I do know that the sickest of the sick patients, pulmonary patients, are in a hospital. So what are we going to do about it? Who's going to see the patient? And after he told me again he makes more money on an outpatient basis, he said, well, we'll let the nurse do it. And I said, the nurse. Does the nurse have the same educational background as you do as a pulmonologist? But you know what? The conversations aren't direct. It's not, I say this, you say this, I say this, you say that. It doesn't work like that. It's conversations that are in their small silos. It's almost, I don't know about that, but I make more money on the outpatient. So how do we get that compass back? What I want us to remember is that there's good in all of us, that there's good in our society. And these examples are examples. But when we talk about such broad strokes of things, we have to talk about what I call the underground. This is the underground. This is how we talk as families. I had a conversation with one of the directors from the Center for Innovation, and he called me because of some of the things I had written. And he's bringing together a group of 40 people in the country to talk about health reform. And I said to him, when you bring these groups together, you bring the best of the best, the brightest of the brightest in a format and in a forum that really capitalizes on the intellectualism. So if the good is there, and I'm in an environment that really promotes thought, the good thoughts are going to come out. But the pragmatism of actually implementing reform measures, whether banking or education or healthcare, come in the underground, come in the commentaries that I've been making to you. It's what I hear. It's what I hear when nobody else is around. That's where the problem is. And until we recognize that there is an underground of commentary, how are we going to solve the problem? We're certainly not going to solve the problem, as Secretary Sebelius stated at a luncheon that I attended, that we'll save enough money to fund the 38 million people from what we'll save on the efficiencies of managed care. Now, I'm being simplistic, but I sure don't think there's that much inefficiency. We haven't scratched, you know? We haven't really gotten down to saying, how are we going to do it? We made a giant leap in 2010 in healthcare, because what did we decide in healthcare reform? Not reform, accessibility. Healthcare reform in March of 2010 was accessibility to healthcare. That was major. But it was couched in the vernacular that was inaccurate. We haven't even touched reform. We're still teetering on the access question. So, where do we go? What do we do? Well, we need to have a sense of direction, and that direction is guided by our internal personal compass, by our collective national compass, and a global compass, because we're a global economy, we're a global world. It is not just about the United States. It's about the United States and how we think with our allies and how we collectively make decisions, especially on foreign policy. Foreign policy decisions are being made on a global basis. We must be true to ourselves. We must know. We must know our own beliefs. I was influenced by, again, a controversial psychologist. It seems like all the people I like are controversial. That's because they have something to say. And I've been guided by the concept of the shoulds of life. Do any of you know about that, the shoulds of life? The shoulds of life means, how should I be reacting to this situation? Not how do I react? How should I react? How do other people think I will react? Well, if we can't get over the shoulds of life, we'll never know our own. So think about that. Think about that the next time you're faced with a dilemma. And think about the truth of, do I believe this? Or do others believe this? Do I believe this? Or do I think that that's what society thinks I should believe? Or my family thinks I should? Or my professor thinks I should? Or my boss thinks I should? If we're only looking at me, if we only look at number one, that's not acceptable, because we would decay. To do good, to do what's right, is how we will prosper. And I don't mean this in a Pollyannish way. I don't mean it in a way in which I'm not realistic about the complexities and the interworkings of these sectors. But the lessons are universal. Whatever sector we choose, whether it's law, healthcare, business, finance, the principles of success are identical. The common threads are respect for the client, for your colleagues, and your adversaries. You can get a whole lot more done with a little respect to your adversaries than you can if you let yourself get eaten up by the emotions. Dr. Peters has often heard me say this, and I've said this at commencement addresses, which is to embrace the essence of intellectual discourse rather than with me or against me. We need to come back, and we are a university. Where else are we going to teach this? Where else are we going to say that the pure essence of intellectual discourse is what gives us joy? It's part of, most definitely, the fiber of law school. We must frame the issues in a factual and dispassionate manner while being passionate as to the beliefs being upheld. So, take a stand, have an opinion. Michael tells me I don't have strong opinions. Have an opinion. It's okay, you know? It's okay. Give counsel. Take the heat when it's necessary. You know, if you do something wrong, I will tell you this, an easy way to just kind of cut the whole conversation is to say, I'm sorry. If a client's really all over you, you just keep quiet, you take it, and you say you're sorry, and that you will rectify it. Well, then that balloon kind of goes. Believe. Believe in the good of individuals. Believe in right and might. And believe in tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cherilyn, for that inspirational speech. You've given us so much to think about today and for the rest of the year. I want to just recognize, as Cherilyn did and others, the presence of the university leadership here, the professors of the law school, the board of visitors, and the entire community. We ought to do this more often, don't you think? So maybe that will be possible very soon. I also want to acknowledge the presence of John Riley, Professor Riley's son, who is here today, and I hope that your father would have been very proud of the speech today, and his spirit is in the room with us, so thank you for coming. I also want to thank Melody Mitchell and her staff, because they make these events go effortlessly, and she does yeoman's work to make this come off so easily. And last but not least, most importantly, there's a reception upstairs, so we can continue our conversation over some beverages and some snacks. So thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks.